Good afternoon, my name's Curtis Daly. Today we have a very special guest with us. Before we get started, I just want to ask you to like this video. It helps us reach people who may have not heard of us before, and also to share it among friends, family and politicos. Let's begin. The Northern Independence Party is a democratic socialist political party which seeks to make North England an independent state under the name Northumbria. The party was founded in October 2020 by Philip Proudfoot, a former Labour Party activist, and it is currently contesting the 2021 Hartlepool by-election with Thelma Walker, a former Labour MP, as its candidate. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So, let's just start off with, has your campaign officially began yet, or is there still going to be a later date?
Yeah, I mean, we've been campaigning. It's very different how we're campaigning because of COVID. But as our party has campaigned, I mean, I first met Philip Proudfoot, our founder, through social media, which is highly unusual, obviously. But our whole campaign so far that is really gaining traction has been on the Twitter platform, and the number of followers just daily, hundreds and hundreds more followers every day, and there's something about the messaging that is different and engaging, especially with your generation, I would say. And the thing that I think is happening is that it's very much northern humour. And Northerners are very much into self-deprecation. We can laugh at ourselves, but it's very serious political messaging as well. So we've got the engagement. There's a kind of euphoria about this campaign that people are engaging with, because as you just mentioned, it's been a tough year or two in politics, and especially for me. I was 40 years in the Labour Party, and it broke my heart when I left. But each day, Labour at the moment are coming out with something, policy statements or whatever, where I just think, no, I did the right thing. Because in a way, I think that Labour left me and left a lot of socialists, democratic socialists. And I think that's why Northern Independence Party is growing, but also the democratic socialist movement is growing. Because before I became a candidate for Hartlepool, I was engaging privately, but with leaders of the different small left-wing political parties and campaign groups. Because if I've got an issue or we've got a challenge, I think that the left is far too fragmented. And I think that coming together in a left coalition is what Labour and the establishment, if you like, are so terrified of. Because my honest belief is that manifesto we had in 2017 and then in 19 has been seen by the general public, and it can't be unseen. And those are true socialist policies that can end inequality and can lead to a better quality of life for everybody. And that's what my message would be to the people of Hartlepool. You are entitled to a good quality of life, and the control of the economy is from Westminster. And it's almost like I describe it as the crumbs from the Westminster table are getting to people in the north. And you've only got to go to the rundown, forgotten towns of the north to see how much deprivation there is, how much child poverty there is, how many people are queuing at the food banks. All of those things, and the food banks are being normalised, as if this is the way it is. But I think we should be challenging that. So yeah, it's a very exciting time. I don't know what will happen with the outcome of the election on May the 6th. I'll be working my hardest with a wonderful team that is the Northern Independence team of volunteers and campaigners. But I think if we do nothing else but have conversations like with people like yourself and with media platforms to get that voice of the North and say, we've had enough now. We've not just had 10, 11 years of austerity. We've had decade, and under Labour governments as well, decade of underinvestment, of really taking from the northern regions and their industry, but no return on that industry and graft from northerners. And I think now the North are speaking out and saying enough's enough, and we can carve our own future through regional investment and federalism.
Precisely, and you mentioned that you spoke to other smaller parties, and I was going to ask this question. Why the Northern Independence Party? Obviously, their main policy is Northern independence. So I suppose I should ask you, why should the North be independent?
Well, I think for me, it is more about federalism. I think the long-term goal, our founder, Philip Proudfoot, will tell you, it is for complete independence. I'm very much for community wealth building, localism, regional investment and federalism. And I saw, when I was a member of the Education Select Committee, when I was an MP for Combe Valley in West Yorkshire, we went to Germany and I saw how the education system worked, for instance, with the federal model and that investment in the regions, and the partnership with business. And, I saw how it could be. And so I'm working very much for taking that economic control from Westminster. And what was it actually in our 2017 manifesto, regional investment banks, so that there is that control, and of course, like the Preston model, where you've got cooperatives, social enterprise, community wealth building. So local people in Hartlepool, as we've got in Combe Valley here, where I live, that mutual aid, that mutual support, that insourcing, so that it benefits people locally, and the quality of life therefore improves. So it's an exciting vision. I think the long term of full independence would be for a referendum.
Yes, of course.
But for me, standing in Hartlepool, and what I actually believe is in that federalism and localism.
Yeah. So I suppose in the Northern Independence Party, the main policy is Northern independence, but there is flexibility for someone like you who is more towards federalism rather than full independence. There is that flexibility within the party. Would you say so?
Well, I think yes. I mean, the thing I love about this party, and the thing I'm discovering every day, is how democratic it is. The manifesto that is being put together now is grassroots up. And this is where in politics we've been going wrong. We've not been listening and involving local people enough. And so the membership, which, as I say, is growing massively each day, are engaging with the process of what do people in Hartlepool, what do people across the North really need to happen to improve the quality of their life, to end child poverty, to raise life expectancy, etc. So this Friday, we're all coming together again, and individuals can have an input. Like, for instance, I'm hoping I get that opportunity, because I'm a former head teacher, to talk about how I would see a future education service across the North. So it is democratic, and I think that's in stark contrast to what we're seeing in Westminster, for a start, with, like, for example, prorogation of Parliament, which the Tories imposed on us, but also with the Labour Party, which, as I say, I think the Labour Party left me. I didn't leave the Labour Party. That imposing a candidate on Hartlepool without any involvement from the membership, so that a person of colour could not go for it, a woman couldn't go for it, a disabled person couldn't go for it. And I think that's what made the final decision of, I'm going to go for it. Because for me, it was just an outrageous thing to do. And I think what I love about the Northern Independence Party is that any massive decisions in the future would go to a referendum, as happens in Italy. That local people are often involved in the political process through local referendum. So I that's what I believe in, and why I'm supporting the party.
The party definitely seems to be very organic in its growth, and like I said, very democratic. And compare it to Labour's kind of the long list of one. It was an opposed parachuted candidate. So there's definitely a lot of natural organisation going on within the party. And like you said, that you felt the Labour Party left you, I think it left a lot of people. I'm certainly disillusioned with the party. So I suppose the question I have, though, is that, like I said, the left is always split, is always fragmented. There are many people who are members of the Labour Party who are socialists, who empathise and sympathise with maybe people who gravitate towards NIP or NIP. But what about people who say, well, first past the post, it's going to be either a Labour or Conservative candidate, and these aren't just people; these are people who sympathise with you or other people who might vote for NIP in Hartlepool. How do we get over that? Do we, have to change the voting system, or do we just campaign really hard for another party? What would you say to those people?
Well, I think I respect anybody's choice. I have friends still in Parliament who have decided to hang on in there, and they say to me, it's our party, Thelma, we're not letting go. We're fighting for our party. And I do respect that. But when I made the momentous decision to leave, which broke my heart, and it's only now that I've got that zest back through this campaign, and that vision has returned, and I feel much more positive about everything now. But having had the privilege of serving the constituents in Combe Valley for 2.5 years, of course I had the experience of being in Westminster, and I see how the Parliamentary Labour Party is. I see what those meetings are like on a Monday evening. I know that without open selection, the nature of that PLP, and there are some brilliant people still, let me say this, in the PLP, but the nature in terms of the balance of power won't change. So we need electoral reform, we need constitutional reform. But the way it is at the moment, I honestly, if you think about it, in the future, the boundary review's coming. So the Tories are going to scoop another few seats for themselves out of that. We haven't got votes at 16. If you just look at that, and there's so much going against us ever having that true socialist, democratic socialist government. And so I weighed up all the odds really, and thought, well, with the system we've got, the PLP the way it is, I don't think it's possible to have a truly democratic socialist government, not just Tory light. We don't want that, because that's not going to improve the lives. We've seen that. It doesn't improve the lives of people in Hartlepool.
So under Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour Party went to the left, massive support of myself, of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party in that era. But do you think that even if the Labour Party had won in 17 or 2019, there would have been limitations because of the British state, and actually the case for like a Northern independence is really strong? Because even if if you were elected on the platform of Jeremy Corbyn and we got into government, there might be stoppages to the socialist policies. Do you think that is the case?
Yeah, of course. It would have been. It's not called the struggle for nothing. There would have been massive, and because of the nature of the PLP, as I've said, and the way our constitution is, the way MSM is. And that is a positive. I mean, just maybe as an aside, but platforms like yours my own, I'll give a plug for my own podcast, Tom and Thelma Look Left. Subscribe and like.
Definitely check it out, guys.
But that is a safe space for left-wing politicians and activists. And I had my own micro experience. I was never high profile. I was high profile in my constituency, and I was John McDonnell's PPS, but never nationally high profile. But I always felt very nervous being interviewed by MSM, because you knew there was an agenda very often.
Absolutely.
You knew it could be edited in a way that would twist what you were saying or misrepresent you, or there'd be a sting in the tail, and you didn't often see the real person with the left-wing politicians. And what we're doing with our podcast, and what I can see are trying to deliver, is that safe space for left-wing serious political discussion, with a bit of banter on our podcast.
Of course.
But it's having that safe space, that platform to discuss it and to see the real person behind that politician or campaigner as well, which often on MSN is really not seen. So we're seeing a growth of like your platform, podcasts, Double Down News, Socialist Telly, Canary. There's just so many. And then we've got Tribune, the printed media, Tribune, Byline Times. I'm sure I've missed a few off, but that's really positive, I think, because that is growing, as is the movement is growing. And of course, there's the Twitter and social media, which is working so well for the party, the Northern Independence Party, and I must admit, it's so cheeky and naughty, isn't it? A lot of the tweets that are on there, and sometimes, I hope I'm the kind of, I do smile because I've got a really good sense of humour, I hope, but sometimes I go, because I am the serious candidate, and people know me, and people on the left in particular in politics know me and know that I'm very serious and very passionate about social justice and improving lives for everybody across the country, but in particular that working class solidarity is very important to me. So yeah, lots of positives, and I think media is one of the areas that the left needed to develop and improve, and I think that's happening.
I'm really enjoying the humour, the northern humour. So I apologise, I'm from the south, from Bristol. So
it's all right. You have everybody. You have everybody. You're welcome.
Some of it might have washed on me. I did have to Google the Whippet and what that was referenced to. So I feel a bit naive, but I do like the humour, and I think it's lost on some people, lost on maybe centrists or the mainstream commentariat, which might think that you're not so serious. But just because you have a bit of humour, because politics is very, very depressing, doesn't mean you're not serious. I can clearly see that. But you touched up on the media, and of course, this is a new channel, new media organisation. It's growing pretty quickly already. There is obviously an appetite for different voices, but the media is a fundamental issue with the British state, the establishment, and obviously across in America. Yes, left media voices are growing, but there still is a homogenous mainstream media political view, and it's very hard to break into that. Most people who aren't very political still watch the BBC and ITV, and they only watch little snippets. So whilst we are doing what we can to have a real discussion and open to political ideas, obviously of left-leaning, how do we convince the people who may not be really political, but without relying on sound bites? I know that's what the media like to do, but how do we take on that? Because if I'm completely honest, Jeremy Corbyn, he was mid. There were issues that he did, there were issues that the left did. It's not like we didn't make any mistakes, but the vitriol from the media was heavy.
Yeah, it was. It's a really tough question, that, because there isn't an easy answer to that, because you do get people who aren't engaged with the political process who do just listen to sound bites, who do just read the front page and don't dig any deeper and don't ask the questions. And this is why I'd go back to education, you know, and how the government are currently trying to control what's taught on the curriculum and how it's taught, because it's almost, you know, their agenda is keeping people in their boxes, as far as I'm concerned. And what they want to do is to make sure that people are generally kept in the dark about what their agenda is, if you understand what I mean. So I think I would say that it is about fighting for the curriculum that is right for everybody. It's making sure that our education service is protected as much as possible. In terms of, we need brave leaders in schools. I used to be a head teacher, as I say, and we need brave leaders who are going to fight for, well, I think what's important is parity of esteem with each of the subjects on the curriculum for a start, to question and challenge the culture of targets and tests, and to make sure that what is taught in schools is balanced, that we do decolonize the curriculum. And so the history that children are taught is the true story of what happened in terms of the empire and colonization, and how people were treated, people of colour were treated in particular. And I think that all of that is so important. It isn't, I can't give you a straight answer to that in terms of how we overcome it. I think it's about, I suppose, somebody like myself who has had a career in education. I didn't need to do this. I've been an MP. I did envisage working hard and continuing with the socialist movement. I hadn't given up politics. I was very involved with it before I stood. But sometimes as a socialist, you have to stand up and be counted. And what I'm hoping that the people of Hartlepool will see, and across the north, is how genuine I am about those values that were espoused in 2017, where we did nearly win and gain power. And I think even people who didn't support Jeremy Corbyn or weren't particularly left-wing, well, there's a poll been done recently to say, is it 76% of people liked those policies that were in the manifesto? And the free broadband, which actually was a discussion between myself, Combe Valley residents, and John McDonnell when he visited, that policy came about from our discussion. It was later called broadband communism by the right-wing media, which now is such a joke because the Tories are advocating it. And it seems to me that the Tories are picking up on those policies because they know they're popular. So during the pandemic, post-pandemic, it's quite convenient for them to pick up on socialist policies. But the difference with the Tories doing that is that it will be the ordinary person that ends up picking the bill. Yeah, picking up that bill. It won't be a wealth tax on their chums in their chumocracy.
I'd certainly be surprised if that happens.
It won't. It will be the ordinary person that pays for any of these policies that they've pinched from the Labour manifesto. And a lot of us who were in the Shadow Treasury team and on that front bench with Jeremy have pointed out that, oh, I wonder where you got this idea from, you know, and it's obvious that they're cherry picking because they're populists and they think, that is a popular policy. We'll use this for now, but you can guarantee once we get through this pandemic that the bill will drop on an ordinary person. So yeah, in interesting times. It is just about, you know, how we change the narrative, how we engage with people who aren't particularly engaged politically is always the challenge. But I think it starts with education. I honestly believe it starts with education. And I honestly believe too that that's why the Tories are really going for teachers. I think they're going for teachers because they want to control either online with their online teaching, which they have funded and it's been outsourced, or the control of the curriculum and using Ofsted to impose their straitjacket model of education, and of course academisation, which I've never agreed with, which is basically selling off our state education as well. So there's so many things I could talk to you about with that, but I honestly believe it starts with education. So it's a long-term project. But I'd like to think that people in Hartlepool can see that I am authentic and genuine about what I'm trying to do here, and genuine about wanting to support local people and get the best for them in whatever way I can. And for now, it will be a voice in Westminster, but I'd love to see. I'd love to see our own parliament in, well, as Philip calls it, Northumbria.
I'm really glad you brought up education. It is fundamentally important because it's not just about skills in terms of mathematics, literature. It is about world building and human nature. And I feel like we haven't got that in our education system. It's very neoliberal, business orientated. Your work is, or the thing you study is only good if it can make money or profit. And maybe that's come through Thatcherism and individualism, which is what people are growing up with. Millennials, like myself, not so much. I think we've got more solidarity amongst ourselves. About what you said about the Conservatives picking socialist policies, obviously we know they're not actually going to fully support them. It's a ploy, it's a political game. But what is interesting, though, is that the Conservatives can read the mood. They know that socialist policies or left-wing policies, state investment, the furlough scheme, obviously, dishy, risky, as people say. But the Labour Party have gone the other way. And despite what Keir Starmer said in the leadership campaign that he would keep those policies, it looks like he's dropped them. And now it looks like the Labour Party, economically, is to the right of the Conservatives. What game are they playing? Is there a strategy here?
The trouble is, I don't think they know the game they're playing. I think that is the really scary thing, is that they've got these focus groups that they're chasing votes. So, and when people see through, we've talked about people who aren't really engaging with politics, but we should never take a vote for granted, and we should never belittle the individual voice and their views and respect the individual voter. And I think Labour have made a massive mistake in taking votes for granted, almost like, well, people on the left or people who've always voted Labour, they've nowhere else to go. Well, they have now. And I think the lack of vision, I think what many centre-right politicians have done, and in MSM, is spent the last 5 years or so just slamming the socialist policies, just slamming Jeremy and what he stood for. And that's easy, actually. You can sit at the sidelines, can't you, carping and moaning about what somebody's doing wrong. That's just easy. There's no pressure on you doing that. But when you're suddenly when you're suddenly the leader who could become Prime Minister, all eyes are on you then. And if you haven't you've been spending all your time planning your career path or trying to undermine the then leader, if you haven't got any real strategy or any real value base, and you're going with your focus groups and they're leading the narrative, then people see through that. The ordinary voter see, and they have. It's like the curtain's been pulled back. And I think the country can see that Labour's all over the place. If they hadn't been so spiteful towards people like Rebecca Long-Bailey and Jeremy, and then they hadn't abstained on human rights bills and votes, I'd have a lot more sympathy. I would, because I was genuine about wanting to support Keir at the beginning. I really did, I was genuine in my commitment. But because they've behaved the way they've behaved, I don't feel sympathy, because I think they've destroyed the Labour brand. I think it's tainted now. And I think it's the end of Labour. I honestly do think it's the end of Labour as we know it, because I can't see with the PLP the way it is at the moment how it can pull back. And if there is a coup against Keir or he steps down, I think we'll go even further right. I think the leader could come. I honestly think we'll go further right, and that means the movement that we are now bringing together across the north, starting with the north, although we're it's growing across the country. There's been a political vacuum, and we're moving into that. And I think it's very exciting times. Tragic for the Labour Party, tragic. Some of it for me is arrogance as well. It's just arrogance of assuming they could take working class votes by talking, the flag and patriotism and all of that. And then yesterday about British weapons and bombs and and foreign policy, we're not speaking out strongly enough about what's happening in Yemen, arming Saudis. It's just from a Labour Party, it's outrageous. So we're all over the place. Because there's no clear vision, and there's certainly not socialist principles at the back of it at all. And I think people see that.
I'm certainly really baffled with the direction of the Labour Party under Keir Starmer, because many people who voted for Jeremy Corbyn twice in the leadership election then went on to vote for Keir Starmer. He pitched himself as the candidate of unity, but let's keep Corbyn's policies. Let's not trash the last Labour government, but let's also not trash the last 5 years. I'm going to take these radical policies and, I might dress them up in a bit more of a professional way. I'll be someone who looks prime ministerial, and the left are like, okay, we'll take the back seat. We're happy to be junior partners as long as the policies are there, because that's what matters to us the most. Now, left-wing policies are popular. Now, yes, Corbyn's popularity decreased quite a bit for many reasons, and let's be honest, the awful treatment by the media. So would you have thought that the new leadership would take, you would have thought the new leadership would have taken those popular things of the Labour Party, and what were the most popular things? It was the policies. So I'm really struggling to understand as to why he has seemingly dropped those policies. And not only that, but in fact gone further to the right. It seems you're just as baffled as me, so...
Well, I think the core goal was to get rid of, Corbyn and the hard left, and they are all to blame. And why they didn't look at what Biden is doing in America and engage with the left, and having Bernie Sanders as your chair of your budget committee was a wheeze, why wouldn't you, and they could have engaged with the left, and look at all those activists that are not out now for Labour. We've got a kind of Labour MP trying to whip Labour MPs to go and door knock on canvas campaign in Hartlepool because they won't go. They're having to force their own people to go and but they would have had all the foot soldiers, as I call them, the activists. We had too many people coming out in 2017. No, you can never have too many, can you? But organising all the volunteers that came to Colne Valley in 2017, there was a wonderful spirit in the air of people saying, I'm going to take some time off work. I'm going to come out with you. What can I do? People shouting to each other across the street, I'm voting for you. There was a mood there, and we were so close. And it is so hard and so ironic when centrists now are saying, we didn't want you lot in the left, but you've got to vote for us now, or you're splitting the vote. The hypocrisy of that knows no bounds, really. But I just answer and say, we are the left. People will need to vote for us if they want socialist policies. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, they spent the last 5 years trashing and smearing the left, telling us to leave the party. And then people leave the party and they say, no, you must come back and vote for us. So there's a lot of taking for granted there.
I think
membership is, yeah, go on.
Sorry, but I was just coming in on that. I think a lot of people, centrists in Labour, probably feel really, really cross with me and have been a bit shocked about me standing for another party. But the thing is, people who know and are honest know that I stood up in PLP meetings and tried my damnedest to bring us together. I made speeches, and it's pretty scary in there in the PLP meetings, standing up in front of hundreds of lords and MPs. And I've not got a long political national politics backgrounds, but I made myself do it. And I talked about social justice uniting us all. And I tried really hard. And as John's PPS, part of my role was to be that bridge between the front bench and the backbench MPs. And I really try to support backbench MPs, to communicate the messaging, to bring us together, and genuinely tried so hard. But then when you saw what happened, and we're still waiting for the leaked report and the Ford inquiry outcome, we're still waiting for that. When you see,
will it be whitewashed? Will it be whitewashed?
Well, we're not seeing it, are we? And what was allegedly meant to have happened, and I did submit my own views on what the culture was like. But I was genuine about wanting to bring us together. I'd been in Labour 40 years. It meant so much to me. But some just don't want it. Some just didn't want it. And whatever you did, they just wouldn't work as a team, wouldn't work together. That culture is toxic, I think. And I think that's what's prevented Labour from being successful.
Yeah, and I think the appeal with the Northern Independence Party is that what we touched upon before, that if Corbyn had become Prime Minister, there's so much internal battles, not just the British state you have to fight against, but there was probably going to be people within the PLP who stood on that manifesto, but probably would have voted against it. So I think there was so much internal problems there. Open selection was an absolute mistake that didn't happen. I think that if we did have open selection, we certainly have maybe not a left-wing leader, but a much more person in tune or ready to work with the left. Membership will be thriving. I think that was the biggest mistake, but that's just what's happened, I suppose. What's the biggest surprise? What surprised you the most that Keir Starmer has done in his first year of leader?
Well,
there's a lot, isn't there?
I've been really shocked about. Well, it depends if you mean surprised or angry or annoyed. I don't know. If I look at the different stages of where I became disaffected with Labour, and I left it as long as I could, and friends I've got in the PLP said, you cannot leave Thelma, you cannot leave Labour, and all the rest of it. But when I was working informally with Rebecca Long Bailey on education, and she got it, she was working with the unions over the COVID and school closures and making COVID safe schools, and I we had this really good kind of relationship going in terms of education, and she's a listener and she's very bright, and she was doing such a fantastic job. So for me, the first nail in the coffin was when Becky was sacked. So there was that. But the human rights bills, and then this recent police behaviour at Clapham Common and in Bristol, and his stance on that is another thing. And then, of course, the whip being removed in the way that it was and not returned, even to this day, to Jeremy. So it isn't just one thing with me that I've been shocked or surprised at. And then when you look at those 10 pledges that he stood on as leader, I'm not sure there's one that he hasn't. Certainly uniting the party was one of them, and engaging with the unions, neither nursing nor teaching unions. And And then, they're kind of saying it's a local election campaign, but they're talking about saving the NHS when they're not blocking this integrated care that the Tories are bringing in, which is the creeping privatisation of our health service. That's the truth of it. And their candidate in Hartlepool is a part of that, and the USA healthcare model. So there's so many things, and I'd expect here not to be saying, and the Labour Party, well, the Tories are offering 1% to nurses, we'll offer 2.1%. We've got nurses at food banks at the moment, people who've helped us get through this pandemic, who in real terms have taken a massive pay cut over the last 10 years, who can't afford to pay their rent or their mortgage, and they're at food banks. It's disgraceful. The Labour Party should be saying, if you think of pro rata and how much real costs they've lost, 15%, the people are mocking me because I do think entitled to that 15%, but it's far too much. It isn't, not if you value nurses. Same with public sector pay as well. It needs massive investment to recover from the underinvestment over the last 11 years.
Yeah, so I'm glad you said about the 15% increase. I think it is absolutely, it should be the right policy, because it's not just about increasing the pay, it's the 10 years of austerity which is lost. 1%, 2% is absolutely pitiful.
Well. It's shocking, it's insulting, isn't it? Yeah, it's insulting.
Absolutely pitiful, but also a lot of the public will support it. There was a poll by the CW that has the Northern Independents in third place on 2%, and I don't think you even started your official campaign yet. That's exciting, isn't it?
It's really exciting. We're absolutely delighted. Unbelievable, really, isn't it? Because it's mainly, I am engaging, with COVID, it's difficult, but I am engaging. Yesterday, I met with the WASPy women fighting for pension justice, and I'm a WASPy woman, so it was great to meet them and have a good laugh with some women of a similar age and talking about their campaign and how I would obviously support their campaign in Hartlepool. But I'm going to be engaging with the different groups in Hartlepool that, there's a soup kitchen in Hartlepool on a Thursday. You think in this day and age, and food banks, all across the country, but especially in the forgotten towns of the north. And it's been normalised. That's the thing. Like, oh yeah, everybody has a food bank. Well, no, one of our policies is for universal basic income. Now, I've always been a believer and a supporter of this. And obviously it's at the trial stage, but Labour's previous policy was a guaranteed minimum wage. But I always thought the safety net of a universal basic income was the way to go. And definitely post-pandemic, I think people having just a small income, but enough so they wouldn't need to go to the food banks. They wouldn't need to go through the benefit system, which is very divisive. And it cultivates this blame culture of, oh, I'm not paying my taxes to pay those people who are sponges. That narrative, that culture, that language that has been cultivated by the far right, I think, in particular. But a universal basic income, I think, is just so right for now, in particular, as a safety net. And that is one of our policies. So there's lots of stuff there that I'm feeling really positive about for the future.
Universal basic income, I personally would have liked to see that implemented rather than the furlough scheme. Yeah. Because everyone would have been covered.
Furlough is really. Yeah, that furlough, what furlough's doing, I know it's only temporary, but it's a similar model, isn't it? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, it's okay. But yeah, because I felt like it covers everybody, but also businesses as well. Business can't open, so they can't, bring the money back in. So I thought a universal basic income was the way to go. I suspect that the Tories wouldn't have done it because they didn't want it to be permanent, and the furlough scheme is easier to get rid of.
Yeah.
So, but I'm glad you're in favour of UBI. I'm in a mixed bag with UBI. I completely support the moral side that, if you lose your job, there's a safety net. Completely support that. I'm just worried that maybe companies might use that as a sort of profit-making machine. People spend that money on profits of companies. But that's a debate that should be had, and we're long overdue for that. Definitely long overdue for that. One final question, and I'll let you go, so I'm sure you've got a very busy schedule.
Yeah, it's quite a few interviews.
I bet. 2019, catastrophic defeats for the left, but also not just for the left, for millions of people who desperately needed a Labour government, but also a socialist Labour government. The Conservatives are becoming more and more right-wing. The Labour Party seems like they're nowhere. They're not standing for anyone. What does the left do from now? I think the Northern Independence Party, whatever happens in this by-election, is definitely here to stay. I'm very excited. And in the unlikely chance that you were to win, I couldn't help but be slightly satisfied of seeing Labour get a bit of a kick-in. But where does the left go from now? And also, do you have a message of hope for people who feel a bit disillusioned?
Yeah. Well, as I've said, on a personal level, I'm feeling that euphoria we had in 2017 and that feeling of hope, and that we've got that vision now. And I think the key thing for the left is for us to get that left-wing coalition going, to have the conversations, to come together, say we have a shared value base that we want people to have across the country, not just the north, a good quality of life. We want them to have decent housing, health that is fully funded, education that is fully funded, connectivity on broadband, but in transport as well. We want people to be healthy. We want them to have long lives. Most of all, it sounds a bit woolly and corny, but what I would say is we want people to be happy. We've had a terrible time through this pandemic, and there's a mood, not just because of COVID, but because of people feeling so desperate. We've got mental health problems, across the generations and across the country. And this, I think, is the time for us to say, no, enough. Let's put ourselves as a priority. Let's put the profit of anything we do being happiness and health and well-being. And I think the policies that we're propounding is about the individual and society as a whole and our health and well-being. And I think if we come together on the left, we can give people that hope and the right to a decent life. That's what it's about.
Well, Thelma, thank you so much for coming on today. We'll have to have you on again. A brilliant discussion. And enjoy the rest of your day.
It'd be good to see after May the 6th, wouldn't it? Yeah, great to meet you, and good luck with the media platform.
That was Thelma Walker, former Labour MP. Very interesting discussion there. I think if Thelma keeps her deposit or Northern Independence Party does really well, I think they're definitely here to stay. They've clearly picked up on the mood that the Labour Party is left in a vacuum. Want to see more content like this? Then make sure you like, share and subscribe to Turn Left for an independent media for independent voices.